adjourn, Olivia Blake.
I would like to thank the Speaker through you, Madam Deputy Speaker, for allowing parliamentary time on this important topic in this adjournment debate on miscarriage. I wanted to bring to the Chamber's attention the recent series of papers published in the Lancet entitled Miscarriage Matters and the petition by Tommies on support for women after miscarriages. The petition currently has over 170,000 signatories. I know that this topic is often one that is difficult to talk about, but I hope by giving the Chamber an opportunity to hear some of the experiences and latest research that this debate can act as a catalyst for change for miscarriage services in the upcoming Women's Health Strategy. For too long, miscarriage has been a taboo, and I was disappointed that while the press release for the Women's Health Strategy Call for Evidence mentioned breaking taboos, it did not mention miscarriages directly, only pregnancy-related issues. I am so pleased that prominent women like Meghan Markle in my lean class have been brave enough to speak and break the taboo about their experiences. Miscarriage is little spoken about, but incredibly common. 1 in 4 pregnancies are thought to end in miscarriage. The research suggests 15% of recognised pregnancies around the world end in miscarriage. That's 23 million miscarriages a year, or 44 miscarriages a minute. Black mothers face 40% higher relative risk than white mothers, and the risk of miscarriages is the lowest between the ages of 20 and 29, but goes up 3-fold by 40 and 5-fold by 45. Unfortunately, I think this commonality and the well-known challenges in women's health has meant that services are not always set up with the best interests of women. Miscarriages are often a symptom of an underlying health condition. It shouldn't be that they should just seen as a fact of life, and I am concerned that this attitude speaks to a wider gendered inequalities in our society. I shared my own experience in Westminster Hall debate last year, and I've been overwhelmed by families contacting me to share their experiences. I've heard from women who have never told anyone but their partners they've experienced a miscarriage, and women who have experienced this 30 years ago, still carrying the hurt. And now, some seeing their children go through exactly the same issues. Although I spoke of my loss to highlight the impact of the pandemic, what is clear to me is that COVID or not, there are some huge holes, sometimes voids, in the care provided. Some people are lucky enough to have access to fantastic services, early pregnancy units, others attend their GPs, and others end up at A&E. But unfortunately, some attitudes seem to be very, very prevalent, both in society and in some health services. Of course.
Thank you, Madam Deputy. Can I say how moved I was, and the Honourable Lady knows this, how moved I was with her contribution in Westminster Hall on that day. It certainly moved me to tears, and the lady knows that. But I just want to congratulate her on doing this. It should probably change the way that we handle support for miscarriages as a result of that debate. Does the Honourable Lady not agree that the threshold of 3 miscarriages in a row for NHS investigation must change, as every miscarriage is devastating and the estimation of an acceptable level of loss is indeed abhorrent?
I absolutely agree. Now, I'll come on to the issue of how care is provided later in the debate. There seems to be a general lack of understanding that whilst miscarriage is common, it is also incredibly traumatic and can lead to mental health problems. The Lancet research series highlights that anxiety, depression and even suicide are strongly associated with going through a miscarriage. Partners are also likely to be affected, and previous reports have highlighted links with PTSD. Despite this, the loss associated with miscarriage can often be minimised with phrases like, "It's okay, you can just try again," or "It just wasn't meant to be this time." After my miscarriage, I got into a cycle of blaming myself and obsessing over what went wrong. If I ate the wrong thing, lifted something too heavy, and so many other ridiculous thoughts. I have had to have counselling to deal with my trauma, but it was not offered. It was something that I had to seek out myself. The same cycle has been described back to me again and again and again by people who have experienced miscarriages. My brave constituent Lauren, who has allowed me to share her story today, has sadly suffered 3 miscarriages, has never ever been offered any mental health support through the miscarriage pathway. In fact, even after she requested it, her miscarriages were not even recorded on her medical notes, leading her to explain to 5 different healthcare professionals about her 3 miscarriages. And on one occasion, a member of staff asked about when she had had her first child. This is clearly incredibly distressing, and why I support the calls for better data collection and patient recording of miscarriages. Women have also told me about suffering 3, 4 and 5 miscarriages. The reasons found for these were underlying health conditions such as blood clotting disorders, autoimmune diseases and thyroid disease. Since my miscarriage, I have since ended up in hospital again and being diagnosed with diabetes, an issue that may have been picked up if there was testing carried out at the time of my miscarriage. The information I've received since my diagnosis of diabetes about pregnancy has been very informative and helpful, and a really stark contrast to those who have to get information about miscarriage. Now, there are some excellent examples and many, many committed staff who are often share the frustrations about the system, which has a hard cut-off of 24 weeks for some support services. And we've seen a huge number of organisations stepping forward to fill the gaps in support and advice. Tommy's, SANS, the Miscarriage Association, and locally in Sheffield, the Sheffield Maternity Cooperative. I spoke with Phoebe from the cooperative, an experienced midwife who herself has gone through a miscarriage. She works with individuals and families across the city to provide timely, appropriate and sensitive care after her own experiences were unfortunately the exact opposite of that. So what should we do? Well, I hope today the Minister will respond to the key findings of the Lancet series and these key asks. The first is that the 3 miscarriages rule needs to end. The large number of people who have signed the Tommy's petition show the strength of feeling. We wouldn't expect someone to go through 3 heart attacks before we try to find out what was wrong and treat them. So why do we expect women to go through 3, in some cases, preventable losses before they are offered the answers and treatments they need? Instead, the research recommends a graded support system where people get information and support after their first miscarriage. We shouldn't phrase it like that, though. Tests after the second and a consultant-led care after the third. The second key ask is 24/7 care and support being available. That care should be standardised to avoid a postcode lottery or patchy provision currently available, and it should include follow-up mental health support to help reduce mental illnesses post-miscarriage. Finally, we need to acknowledge that miscarriage matters and start collecting data on miscarriage, stillbirth and preterm rates. I was shocked to find that no central data existed on the statistics, and these estimates are based on very many different sources. We must break the taboo on miscarriage. I know from personal experience and from many people who have contacted me that we could do so much better. Will the Minister today commit to take forward these proposals and take a stand for women, individuals and families that the system is failing? And will she meet with me and campaigners to discuss this issue further?
Hear, hear.
Minister Nadine Dorrit.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, first of all, I want to pay tribute to the Honourable Lady, Member for Sheffield Hallam, for how brave she is. And I think she moves everybody to tears, actually, when she talks about her story, because it's personally so touching. And I responded to her debate the first time in Westminster Hall. And so she hasn't elaborated on her own situation in the way she did then. But you are so, sorry, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Honourable Lady is so incredibly brave to do what she does and to champion those women who have suffered from miscarriages. And I also just want to say that I worked very closely with her mother at the beginning of the COVID outbreak, Judith. And I think your mother must be very proud of you. She's a formidable lady. I have the hugest respect for her, and I'm sure she's incredibly proud of you today too. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, I would like to thank everybody who has shown particular interest in this subject, both in the Chamber and in the Westminster Hall debates which have been held. And it's as a result of, I was also like to thank Tommy's, actually, in Coventry, for those who might think I'm talking about a hospital over the bridge. So for their incredible, the charity, for their incredible work to support families through their pregnancy journey, including those that sadly miscarry, and for the funding research centres and specialist clinics to help us understand why pregnancy sometimes goes wrong and how we can prevent complications and loss and provide specialist care for those women who need it. Tommy's petition to improve miscarriage care has drawn a huge amount of support, and I am glad that this deeply important issue has the attention it deserves. The 3 papers published in the Lancet provide an important insight into the prevalence, effects and costs of miscarriage. Miscarriage is the most common complication of pregnancy, experienced by an estimated 1 in 5 women, and we know that miscarriage can significantly impact the emotional and psychological well-being of women and their families. And it can be extremely isolating for women and their partners with long-term complications. Women who have suffered miscarriage are 3.8 times more likely to die by suicide, and it only takes 1 miscarriage to increase the likelihood of a suicide for a woman. Such difficult experiences should not be faced alone, and that is why, as part of the NHS long-term plan, we are improving the access and quality of perinatal mental health care for mothers and their partners affected by their maternity experience during miscarriage, or including miscarriage. Mental health services around England are being expanded to include new mental health hubs for new expectant or bereaved mothers. The hubs will offer treatment to around 6,000 women in the first year for a range of mental health issues, from post-traumatic stress disorder after miscarrying or giving birth to others with a fear of childbirth. The new hubs will also provide specialist training for midwives and other maternity staff, as well as services for reproductive health and bereavement. And the Lancet series highlights the unacceptable inequalities in women's chances of having a miscarriage. Black women have a 40% increased relative risk of miscarriage compared to white women. It also provides evidence for the importance of maintaining a healthy lifestyle before conception and during pregnancy for all women to reduce the risk of miscarriage. Women who smoke in the first trimester are 1.2 times more likely to have a miscarriage than non-smokers. Women with a low BMI under 18.5 are 1.6 times more likely to miscarry, and those with a BMI over 30 are 1.9 times more likely. This is the information that we know. The NHS is open for all, and no women should feel like they cannot seek help. And the earlier women come forward during their pregnancy, the easier it is for the NHS to make sure that they receive the right support to reduce the risks. Pregnancy lasts around 40 weeks, but a lifetime approach is needed to address some of the reasons why some women are at more risk than others. Tackling health inequalities and levelling up society is a priority. While there is still more to do, good progress has been made to improve maternity safety and achieve our national maternity safety ambition. Since 2010, the stillbirth rate has fallen by 25%. 98,000 women now receive care from the same midwife team throughout their maternity journey, that we call that continuity of carer, up from 10,000 women in March 2019. This helps to reduce, and that's through COVID as well. This helps to reduce baby loss, preterm births, hospital admissions, and the need for intervention during labour, and improves women's experiences. It is so important that the voices of women, including those who have suffered miscarriages, are heard. And that's why I pay tribute to her, because here in this place, she champions those voices. I announced in March this government is embarking on the first women's health strategy for England, something that I was absolutely committed to start and finished when I first became a minister in the Department for Health. This strategy is first and foremost about listening to women's voices. The call for evidence recently closed, and we have seen an incredible response. Over 112,000 women from across the country came forward to share their experiences in the online survey. And the call for evidence specifically asked about women's experiences with fertility, pregnancy and baby loss, which is such an important area of women's health. And we are analysing responses closely to make sure the strategy reflects what women identify as their priorities, and we will consider the recommendations made in the Lancet series as part of this work. I'm also looking forward to visiting Tommy's, myself, the National Centre for Miscarriage Research in Coventry in the coming months. Their research into the causes of miscarriage and search for solutions and treatment is incredibly valuable. And I look forward to meeting with the authors of the Lancet papers and talking to some of the patients to hear about their experiences of miscarriage and miscarriage care. And I would like to extend an offer also to meet with my honourable friend so that we can discuss this issue further too. Every miscarriage is a tragedy, and it is only right that parents are supported through difficult times. Now, she asked me, particularly with regard to the recommendations that were made, and so I just want to go through the recommendations and what I'm doing about each recommendation. So, recommendation 1 was to ensure that designated miscarriage services are available 24/7 to all, taking into account local conditions, resources. So, I'm including recommendation 1 in the Women's Health Strategy as part of the work that we're doing there. Specifically about those issues that I've spoken about in this speech. Recommendation 2, treatment and care must be standardised and equitable, and appropriate care must be given to everyone after miscarriage 1, 2 and 3 in line with a graded model of care. Not putting that into the Women's Health Strategy because as a government, as a minister, I don't decide what the guidelines or the recommendations are around miscarriage because I'm not obstetrician or a gynaecologist, and we are politicians. So we look to the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynaecologists, and we've asked them, they will be reviewing the guidelines regarding, they are reviewing actually, already, the guidelines regarding recurrent miscarriages, and they're expected to publish that later this year. And I'm very sure that the findings of the Lancet papers will be included in that review, and I hope, I express now, that those recommendations will be taken into account when they review the guidelines. Recommendation 3 was to acknowledge that miscarriage matters to parents and take steps to record every miscarriage in England. The story of her friend was disturbing, and recording and data is so important. And so I am putting that recommendation into the Women's Health Strategy to be as part of our review. So during the summer with the Women's Health Strategy, the 112,000 responses is huge. So it's going to take some time to get all those responses together, group them into the areas that people have responded with, and then in each of those areas take forward our policy and recommendations. So I've asked for both of those recommendations to go into the section on miscarriages, fertility, baby loss and pregnancy. And I hope the Honourable Lady is happy with that. It's incredibly important that we get it right. And to get it right, it needs to be the recommendations need to be fully evaluated. And that's why I look forward to going to Tommy's so that I can talk to people further about this. The National Bereavement Care Pathway was developed with this in mind to improve bereavement care and reduce variation in care that families receive after miscarriage. 63% of England's trusts are now fully signed up, I believe. And of those that now remain, I understand that nearly all have formally expressed an interest in the project that Tommy's have run. And she's absolutely right to say that their response, I'm really impressed with the 112,000 women who've taken the time to respond to our Women's Health Strategy. And I believe Tommy's must be equally impressed with the response that they've had for women. Women are really standing up and making their voices heard because projects like this are giving them the opportunity to do so. Finally, I would like to take this opportunity to urge those women who have suffered in miscarriage to help the NHS, to help you. Please do not suffer in silence. Please reach out and seek support. And the first place to do that is with your GP or in the hospital where you receive care. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the Minister for the sensitive way in which she's responded to the great courage that the Honourable Member for Sheffield Hallam has shown in bringing this subject to this chamber. Most of us have never dared to raise these matters here because we know the reaction that we would previously have got. But now we've made a difference, and the Honourable Lady and the Minister have made a big difference today in treating this matter with the seriousness it deserves here in this chamber. The question is that this House do now adjourn. As many as that opinion say aye. On the contrary, no, the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. Order.